The suckling pig on the spit was what everybody just loved. It was one of the biggest crowd pleasers you could possibly imagine. But the boudin noir, that would be, for me, my personal favourite, because that was such a triumph in texture, flavour, and skill set. Didn't always go right.
This is The Crackling. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Working in some of the best restaurants under incredible mentors can give you the grounding to go on to great success as a chef. But for some, delving into the world of professional butchery, as well as learning the chefing trade, has given a greater understanding of the anatomy of an animal and the best ways not only to cook it, but to use every little bit too. This is the building blocks that created the foundation for Darren Templeman to take his nose-to-tail approach to the craft, and it's led to a new gig where the best quality meat is front and centre. Darren, you've done many things in your career, but you've had a real dedication to the pig and celebrating it in many of the restaurants you've worked at. What is it about the pig that fascinates you?
Versatility, flavour, and just goddamn deliciousness. That's it, end of the day.
Do you remember the first time that you had to break down a whole pig, and were there any challenges involved?
Oh, for sure. So what I used to do, I used to work in a casino in Mayfair. This is going back into the late 80s, early 90s. And on my day off, I would travel up to Walthamstow, to Waltham Forest, and do a butchery course. So I was like an apprentice butcher. So I was working with I was a chef as such, just a chef de partie. And I was doing my day off as an apprentice butcher with all these, butcher types. So there was me as a chef, with my nice little knife set and turning up with these guys with a chainmail glove, like a hatchet basically. And yeah, so I did a butchery course with these guys, which was absolutely fantastic, which then led into me doing 2 or 3 nights a week at Smithfield Market in London. So I'd finish my shift at about midnight and cycle, when I was still cycling, cycle across London down to Smithfield and do maybe 3 or 4 hours there with the guys. I started off just on like shoulders and bellies of pig, and then eventually progressed to the whole pig. And when I first did it, the sense of achievement was massive, but I was so nervous with all these giant butchers around me, man, all covered in blood, staring at me. I was like, oh my God, here we go. But yeah, no, since that point, I was just like, yeah, this is, what a life.
Well, what sort of difference does it make, having that skill when you're then going on to cook various parts of the pig?
Immense. Every chef should do, even just a basic butchery course, because it's something that's really getting lost now in the modern kitchen. You're having all these the pre-packaged steaks are coming out pre-portioned, but to have the ability to break down an animal, even from like a suckling pig, it's a great skill set to have, and I think really important for a chef, for sure.
What was food like for you when you were young in your family?
Okay, so growing up on a council estate in the 70s and 80s in the UK, but Mum was a great cook. She was a school dinner lady as well, but she was also a great cook. And she used to, spend all her Sundays making like Bakewell tarts and jam roly-polies and biscuits and stuff and sponges. But it was, the rest of the week, apart from Sunday where you had the roast dinner, the rest of the week, it was offal, there was liver, there was all kinds of stuff. And I remember there was one occasion we went out with my father out to the moors in Devon, we went rabbit hunting. They brought back a few rabbits. The next door neighbour, he helped skin them and stuff. And it was quite amazing. And like that night, we thought nothing else of it. Me and my sister, we just go off, we play, football, we go out and do whatever. And that night we see on the table a beautiful pie, golden crusted pastry. And Mum tells us it's swan pie. And and we've sat down and we've thought nothing else. It's like delicious. We're smashing through it, absolutely gorgeous. And she tells us as we finish, and we're just mopping up the last of it with a bit of crusty bread. And she's like, oh, that was the rabbit. And me and my sister went into hysterics. We were like, oh, you can't be feeding us rabbit. We just, unbelievable. We've just been out. We're happy to go out and kill them on the moors, but, then to eat them, it's a different situation. And it was just like, since it's a story, but my mum denies now, but me and my sister was like, it happened. That so happened. You were happy to feed us swan. Yeah, and we were happy to eat it. That's the funniest thing. Yeah, bizarre. Yeah.
What led to an interest in food for you to start a journey as a chef?
Oh, look, because we grew up on a council estate in the UK. So, for us, food was, it was to fill you up. It was it was substance, But my interest was like, you see the things that were happening in the food world. Chefs were just starting to, this is maybe 86, 87, and just starting to make a name for themselves as such. Michael Pierre White was just coming forward. There was all these Pierre Kaufman was always around. Nicole Adonis was about. These chefs were doing stuff I've never even heard of, never even seen anything like this. And it was just captivating. And a lot of my friends at school, they all went in, because it was a naval town, they all joined the Navy or the Marines. And I was just like, no, that's not for me. That's not a life I envisage. And I'm very happy I didn't do that. So I joined the YTS, part of Margaret Thatcher's Get the Youth Working type thing. It was £28.50 a week. For 40 hours, I joined a 1-star Michelin restaurant, and that was the journey started.
Take us back to the first time you worked in a commercial kitchen. What was it like?
So, whilst working going to school still, I left school at 15, 15 and a half. So, went back to finish off my my CSE, and so did a bit of a work experience at the Holiday Inn, and to say the big German chef there, and the whole brigade. It was all guys, and you could see how hard they were working. They were really, the team was working so well together. They were, a good group of guys. They were all cooking some great food. They had great camaraderie, and that's where I first started to feel to myself, I can belong here. I feel really happy here, working away, doing some really tasty food, and apart from the scary head chef, because I was just a young lad at the time. And I was just like, wow, this is where I fit in. This is really where I fit in. And then moving on then to the Michelin star restaurant, Chez Nous, and that was just like different level again. All of a sudden I've gone from working in a huge kitchen with maybe 25, 30 chefs on per shift to 5 of us maximum. And Jacques, the head chef, was just completely over everything. There was no room for maneuver. There was no room for error. It was quite amazing. So I spent the first 3 or 4 months blanching and deveining sweetbreads and poking out bone marrow.
You moved to London at a young age, and you ended up working at the oldest restaurant in London. Tell us about your experience there.
Yeah, Rules was amazing. So when I did a stint at a casino to start with, which was Crockford's, which was amazing again. But after working in it's almost like living in a bubble in a casino, because you got the food costs are non-existent. You're using the best of what's on offer. So you got to use, you got caviar, you got wild salmon coming down from Scotland, you got foie gras coming from France, squab pigeons, everything. Anything you need, it arrives. Going to Rules, now you have to use the basic ingredients. You have to learn to cook properly with the most humblest of ingredients and turn that into good food. So that was just amazing. That was phenomenal. And then we used to work into the seasons really heavily. So we'd have the game season start. So early August, you'd have the grouse coming in. So the first grouse, that would all come down from Larkington Hall up near Newcastle. So it all come down on feather. So it's the first time I've really had, well hung game, that had been left to ferment literally on feather until we have it. And it was just an amazing experience. Grouse, pheasant, widgeon, teal, you name it, we had it. Red deer, roe deer, the lot. It was an amazing experience.
You were in London at a time when Marco Pierre White and Gordon Ramsay and the whole sort of celebrity chef was coming to the fore. But what were the real influences on you during that time as a chef?
Yeah. So for me, my biggest epiphany was Bruno Lube. Like working with him, he was the sort of guy who would take you under the wing. You know, um, he would run through all the reasons why every component is on the plate and why it's there. You know, he would go through. You know, he would be so into the produce, into the quality of the ingredients, into the quality of the chefs coming to the kitchen. For me, it was just like, wow, this is. I literally at that moment was like, this is the best time of my life. And I spent like 7 years working with Bruno in London at that time, and that was just amazing.
Do you have any stories from that time in the kitchen that you can share?
I can share. So the first time I really had like a eyes wide open moment with pork was we had this one dish on. It was braised pork cheek with chorizo in a crepinette and then slowly braised, like an English style faggot, as we used to call it back in the 80s and the 70s. Absolutely delicious. Something that it was such a fragile, delicate dish, but had so many robust flavors. It was just amazing. And this is one of those dishes where you had to take such care of it during service. And at the time, we could be doing anything between 250 and maybe 380, 400 covers on the busiest night. Yeah. And these little things would be, like bobbing around in the brassage on the service, and all of a sudden, if somebody just knocked the tray or knocked the pan a little bit too hard, then it would just release all the crepe in it. It would just float to the surface, and you're just left with nothing. Your little balls of pork jowl and chorizo are just gone, dissolved. And this happened once to me on a really busy Saturday night, and Bruno was just standing there, just looking at me, and I was just like, I just wanted the world to open up and swallow me.
Bruno had a real connection with produce and producers. Do you have any stories of the connections made at that time?
Well, we'd have a lot of guys coming through the kitchens, delivering to us truffles, anything from a truffle to caviar to cauliflowers to onions to baby vegetables. And it was just like amazing for me to see in the centre of London all these farmers coming in and offering, these amazing produce to the chef in the centre of London, right on Regent Street, one of the busiest epicentres of the UK. And here we are having like amazing farm fresh produce.
What led to the decision to move to Australia?
So falling in love was the first one. As I'm sure many an English guy has found that out. So I met my now ex-wife Bernie over in London, and it's a really tough decision to speak to Bruno and to leave his kitchen. So eventually plucked up the courage. We sat down, we had dinner together, me and Bruno. I said, "Oh look, I have to tell you I'm leaving. I'm going to be moving to Australia." And he was like, "Really?" I'm like, "Yeah, man. Sorry." He's like, "Well, so am I." And I was just like, "What?" He said, "Yeah, I'm coming out in 2001. So I was due to come out here in 2000. So I spent the first year in Sydney. I worked up in Katoomba at Eccles Guest House for 6 months. Then I spent a bit of time back in Sydney when the birth of my first daughter, Kate. And then when Bruno arrived in 2001, we moved up to Brisbane and we opened up Bruno's Tables together. And we spent about a year and a half up there together. And then we came back to Sydney. It was a chance of it's going to go two ways now, one of two ways. Either we go back to London and carry on, or we open a restaurant in Sydney. And that was the birth of Atelier.
Well, you won many accolades with Restaurant Atelier. Tell us about what it was like creating your own venue and the challenges involved.
It was amazing because the budget was minimal, literally minimal. And looking around for a site where you can offer something to a customer, yet you can still afford it as a restaurateur back in 2003 was a huge challenge. So we settled on Newtown. And for us, Newtown was an amazing place. We really loved it.
And that wasn't the first site. You ended up moving to Glebe. Tell us about that period of time and what the challenges involved in that.
So having Tillier in Newtown, and we were fully booked, and it was a very small space, and we had the luxury of having a full house every night, and it was a case of, well, to progress further and to offer more to the customer, a better venue is exactly what we need. So looking around, and we found this. We just having a cup of coffee actually on Glebe Point Road, and we just saw this beautiful cottage just across the road for lease. And we're like, oh, look at this place! How beautiful is this? Like a little French auberge, And we went in, had a look, and just like, wow, this is the place. This is what I see Tillier moving into. And we moved in, and we spent, I think, 8 years in Glebe. Yeah.
That's where you made a real name for yourself, and you had a real focus on connecting with farmers. Do you have any stories of some of the connections you made with pig farmers?
Yeah, absolutely. So Anthony Huckstep was my biggest connection. He's down in the Grampians in Victoria. He had a Greenfield farm at the time, and this is such an amazing progressive farmer. He was, one of the first out there doing the 100% free range pigs. They were amazingly happy pigs. I went down to the farm. You see, the sows are walking around, the piglets are just happy. It was just an absolutely amazing place. But what it came down to was the flavour in that pork was just phenomenal, absolutely phenomenal. And the prosciutto that he would get from these hind legs was probably, it still is the best Australian prosciutto I've ever tasted. Just a pity he's still not at the farm.
At Atelier, you became renowned for some of the amazing things you were doing with pork. Is there a dish or two that you can tell us about from your time there that you created?
We were doing a lot of pigs on the spit as well. For me, that was one of the biggest crowd pleasers we could do at the restaurant. Was on a Sunday we do a lot of so every fourth Sunday of the month we do a masterclass. And quite often pork was the how to do crispy crackling pork. Everybody wanted to know, so that was the most high in demand class we had, and that would end up with either a whole pork shoulder, slow roasted overnight, or we do a suckling pig on the spit. And for me, the suckling pig on the spit was what everybody just loved. It was one of the biggest crowd pleasers you could possibly imagine. But going back to the boudin noir, that would be for me my personal favorite, because that was such a triumph in texture, flavor, and skill set, which didn't always go right.
Well, tell us what it takes to make a great boudin noir and what you were doing.
Unpasteurized fresh blood, and that's so hard to get hold of in Australia as well. And yeah, the time and temperature, all the ingredients, the roasting of the spices, there's so many elements there to that can go wrong and can turn the bitterness into the boudin. But yeah, it takes a lot of time and effort to make a good boudin.
You mentioned that your masterclasses taught how to get amazing crispy crackling. Is there any secrets that you have that you can share?
Right. So the biggest secret is keeping the pork belly dry overnight. Leave it in the fridge or in the cool room. Open, no cling film. Pat it nice and dry with kitchen paper. Leave it to dry overnight. Then do not score it the next day before you put it in the oven. Just a little bit of vegetable oil, salt, into a very hot oven. 220, 230 for 15 minutes. Allow that crackling to form. Then turn oven down to 180 and just give it a nice roast. Maybe another 40 minutes depending on the thickness of the pork belly, and that'd be perfect crackling every time.
Restaurant Atelier won many accolades over its time. What's some of your fondest memories of running that restaurant?
The chefs I had come through. Had some really good chefs come through. One of them is Ed Lee. He's now working in Copenhagen. He's a head chef of a 2-star Jordanair in Denmark, and working with guys that come through when they're 18, 19 years old, and seeing them progress through their apprenticeship and then go off and do great things. That to me was the best thing ever, for sure. And I still keep in touch with a lot of the chefs over the years that have come through.
How do you describe your style of cooking? That was rooted in French cookery, and you've been using Australian ingredients. But tell us a bit about where you're at as a cook.
Yeah, look, I think the best thing about being a chef is that you can be very progressive. You're always moving forward. So even though my foundations are firmly rooted in classical French food, coming into Australia opens you up to a multitude of new flavors I could never have even imagined before. So all these new flavors and textures and aromas that are, from Asian cookery that I tasted for the first time when I arrived here, have all been intertwined into what I've been doing now. So you see a lightness of flavors come through now, so some more pronounced flavors as opposed to the heaviness of the French style.
Restaurant Atelier was in sort of a busy end of Glebe Point Road in the suburbs, but you also worked looking over the city way up high at Obar and dining with a sort of farm to table philosophy. What was it like working up there?
Oh, it's amazing. So imagine when you first start working with Michael Moore, the whole reason for bringing me on board as well was to take away. So it was a heavy tourist restaurant, very tourism-based restaurant. We wanted to be able to move away from that situation and give this amazing view, this amazing restaurant and bar back to Sydney-siders. So locals can come, celebrate the birthdays, Christmases, anniversaries, and have something special for Sydney-siders to come to. And that to me was amazing. So it took a couple of years to do that transformation, but we got there in the end. And until this very day now, with COVID and no tourists coming in, Michael is in Obar, is living off that success for sure. It's fantastic.
Tell us about the food that you were cooking and how you transformed that.
Complete emphasis on local produce. So we had the guys up at Epicurean Harvest bringing down all their baby vegetables to us. Worked very closely with a lot of farmers and producers and fishermen locally, oysters locally from Makash. It was everything had to be local. The furthest thing we used was the WA Marron. So everything was really Australian. I wanted people to sit there looking over, one of the best harbours in the world, actually the best harbour in the world, and just enjoying some really good Australian produce.
These days you're on the verge of opening a new restaurant, Botswana Butchery. How did that come about? What can you tell us about it?
So Al and Russell, who own Botswana Butchery over in New Zealand, got in touch with me and just asked me a few questions, and we had a bit of a chat. And before we know it, we're signing the deal, and off we go. And it's going to be a heavily meat-focused restaurant. We're going to have 3 different levels. We're going to have a crustacean and raw bar on the ground floor. It's going to be a wood-fired oven and grill on the middle floor, and a rooftop bar on top. So it's going to be it's quite at the old MLC Centre. It's all being completely renovated, and the project looks absolutely amazing.
What sort of impact does running a kitchen and running a business with multifacets like this have on your creativity, and how do you balance that?
I think creativity becomes you can become more open because you have more places. You can use the whole fish, you can use the whole animal. You've got many levels where you can sell that product, and the customer still gets the best and the freshest they can possibly have. So having just one, like at Atelier, I just had the one outlet. Here we can use over 3 outlets, which is like so much more open. Fantastic.
You mentioned how the new restaurant will be quite meat focused. Do you have a pork and meat program in place that you can tell us about?
I do indeed, but I can't tell you just yet. Yeah, so we have a Hunter Valley Wagyu, which is something that's very exciting. It's going to be exclusive to us as well, which I've been working on over the last couple of months. And yeah, so we're going to be using the best meat Australia has to offer.
What's some advice that you have for young chefs out there looking to build their career and make a name for themselves?
Find a kitchen that you enjoy. Once you don't feel you have to keep moving around, find a kitchen that you enjoy. Trust the chef who's there, and move through the kitchen, move through the ranks. You don't have to move to all these different kitchens to become a good chef. Find a kitchen that you really enjoy and you're really happy with your cooking, and that will pay dividends 100%.
Really early on in your career, you'd learnt the art of butchering whole pigs. Tell us a bit about the versatility of the whole pig and how you can use every element in different dishes.
There's nothing that goes to waste with a whole pig, that's for sure. I mean, from crispy ears to crispy tail and everything in between, it will all get used. And it also, the preservation, the salting, there's nothing that you can't keep, amazing.
Is there a favourite cut that you have and a favourite way that you cook it that you can tell us about?
Jowl. I love jowl. For me, very underutilized. I mean, you see it in guanciale all the time, but to have it like confit, pressed, and then crisped up, very similar to like what Peter Gilmore used to do at Key. To me, that's a flavour explosion from the softness of the fat to the crispness of the skin. Beautiful.
Well, Darren, very much looking forward to hearing more about what you do at Botswana Butchery, and we've loved having you on the Crackling today to hear your story. Please keep in touch and we'll catch up again soon. Absolutely. Thank you, Anthony. Cheers, pal. This is The Crackling, a Deep in the Weeds production in partnership with PorkStar. I'm Anthony Huckstep. Stay tuned as we catch up with some of Australia's best chefs and pork producers to discover what makes Australian pork so special.